Alright, let's continue our book reading about John Hopkins Cardiothoracic Surgery, uh, chapters 76 about hypoplastic left heart syndrome. Let's read the key concept, the epidemiology. Hypoplastic left heart syndrome accounts for 5% of all congenital heart anomalies and is responsible for 25% of cardiac deaths in the first week of life. Its incidence is 1.8 in 10,000 live births, with 25% of cases showing associated non-cardiac malformation and 5% associated with chromosomal abnormalities. Morphology: HLHS include a wide spectrum of anatomic abnormalities with the common features of hypoplasia of left ventricle or LV and ascending aorta. At the one end of the spectrum, there may be some mild LV hypoplasia, mild aortic stenosis, and aortic coarctation. At the other end, there is a complete absence of LV, aortic atresia, and aortic arch interruption. Pathophysiology: systemic venous return is channeled via an intra-arterial communication to the right ventricle and through the pulmonary artery (PA) and patent ductus arteriosus to the systemic and pulmonary circulation. Balanced physiology ensues with key P and key S, varying according to systemic and pulmonary vascular resistance (PVR), pulmonary vascular resistance, as well as with the unrestricted nature of the atrial septal defect. Clinical features: as a result of ductal closure in the postnatal period, HLHS is uniformly fatal if not treated. Evidence of pulmonary overcirculation is evident on clinical examination once PVR diminishes in early postnatal life. Pulmonary diagnosis: prenatal echocardiography can be used to detect unbalanced ventricle as early as 20 weeks of gestational age. Postnatal echocardiography rarely establishes the diagnosis and guides medical and surgical decision making. Treatment: prostaglandin E (PGA1) infusion is the cornerstone of early resuscitation, coupled with balloon atrial septostomy in case of restrictive ISD. A three-stage single ventricle palliation approach has been adopted by most centers. The first stage involves aortic arch reconstruction and establishment of a reliable source of pulmonary blood flow, and the second and third stage consists of sequential partitioning of the systemic and pulmonary circulation. Transplantation has been used as the initial approach, or more commonly, for those who fail palliative strategy. In high-risk neonates, initial palliation with a hybrid approach, stenting of coarctation and PA bending should be considered. Outcomes: operative survival of stage 1 Norwood palliation depends on several variables, including anatomic factors, diameters of ascending aorta, operative weight, restrictive ASD, associated anomalies, and nears 80% in several series. Operative mortality between 5 and 10% has been observed for second and third stage palliation. Long-term complications like ventricular failure, atrioventricular valve regurgitation, arrhythmia, and protein-losing enteropathy, among others, dictate late prognosis and the need for intervention or transplantation. Definition. So the definition of hypoplastic left heart syndrome is a challenging disease that includes a wide spectrum of anatomic abnormalities with the common features of left ventricular or LV hypoplasia and hypoplasia of the ascending aorta. At the one end of the spectrum, there may be mild LV hypoplasia, mild aortic stenosis, and aortic coarctation. At the other end, of the spectrum, there may be complete absence of the LV, aortic atresia, or an association with interrupted arch. All these neonates present a serious challenge to congenital heart surgeons, cardiologists, anesthesiologists, and critical care specialists, nurses, and families. HLHS is uniformly fatal in the absence of intervention. There is now little argument about the utility of stage operative repair in these children as a result of continued improvement in operative techniques and perioperative care. Historical highlight. Therapy for HLHS has been one of the great success in the treatment of congenital heart disease or GHD. Before the 1980, HLHS was uniformly lethal condition. Over the past 30 years, relation of HLHS has become a standard operation in nearly all institutions. In 1952, Leff first described maldevelopment of the left-sided cardiac structures in the combination with a small ascending aorta and transverse arch. By 1958, Noonan and Nadas had further defined the syndrome to include a variety of cardiac malformation of left heart structures. The first report of any attempt to palliate a patient with mitral atresia was in 1961 by Redo and Associates, who performed an atrial septectomy using inflow occlusion through a right thoracotomy, and the patient died soon after the operation. In 1968, Sinha and co-workers outlined management of principles that remain in use today, that include creation of an unobstructed atrial communication, unrestricted systemic flow, and control of pulmonary blood flow. Keller and colleagues described an anastomosis between the right pulmonary artery and the ascending aorta with bending of both right and left PAs. Interestingly, 40 years later, PA bending is being employed for selected children in whom medical condition or anatomic substrates render them unsuitable for stage 1 Norwood reconstruction. The first stage hybrid procedure involves stenting the ductus arteriosus and atrial septal defect with the placement of bilateral PA bands. Litwin, Mohri, and others all performed unsuccessful operations that were variations of this principle, which nevertheless contributed to the development of the knowledge of the disease and its palliation. In 1977, Doty and Knott described primary reconstruction that include atrial septation and a right atrium, 2 PA Fontan circuit. Again, though no patient survived, this experience confirmed that one-stage reconstruction wouldn't be successful because of high neonatal pulmonary vascular resistance. Levitsky, Bahrain, and others describe multiple possible surgical procedures. Although the procedure demonstrated no long-term success, they established the principle of stage reconstruction as first described for tricuspid atresia by and Kreutzer. Fontan and Kreutzer. This include a strategy of initial palliation followed by eventual separation of the systemic and pulmonary circulation. However, it was William Norwood who provided a seminal contribution in 1980 and 1983 with the first report a successful stage approach. The Norwood procedure remains the primary reconstructive approach to this day. Norwood procedure. Embryology and anatomy consideration. From a molecular standpoint, the developmental mechanism that underlie HLHS remain obscure, although steady progress continues. Multiple genetic loci are associated with HLHS, including the chromosomal abnormalities of trisomy 13 and 18, Turner and Jacobson syndrome. Single gen defect with a potential association include GGI1, NKX25, Notch1, and Hen1. Furthermore, using a genome-wide language approach, two loci have been associated with HLHS, suggesting that the new technologies may provide important information. Embryologically, there are additional clues. The severe hyperplasia of left heart structures is associated with and likely a consequence of limited flow during development secondary to a primary abnormality of either LV inflow or outflow. Primary defects of myocardial growth are unlikely to be mechanism for this disease. since the myocardium appears normal. And in addition, in approximately 5% of patients with aortic atresia, and unrestricted ventricular septal defect coexist, and in such cases, there is nearly always normal development of the LV and mitral valve. Patient can be categorized on the basis of atrioventricular and semilunar valvular morphology into three primary subsets. One, aortic atresia and mitral atresia. Aortic atresia and mitral atresia, 40%, and two, aortic stenosis and mitral stenosis, 30%, and three, aortic atresia with mitral stenosis. Aortic atresia with mitral stenosis, 30%. Aortic stenosis with mitral atresia is rare. Aortic stenosis and mitral atresia is rare. HL/HS variant include a malaligned AV canal, double outlet right ventricle RV with mitral atresia, tricuspid atresia with transposed great arteries, and univentricular heart with aortic stenosis. There is frequently leftward and posterior deviation of the septal attachment of septum primum, but this is unlikely to be common developmental mechanism, since it is seen commonly in other CHD patients. Usually, the superior and inferior vena cava are connected normally to the RA, although in about 15% of patients, left SVC draining to the coronary sinus is present. Other structural abnormalities of heart are rare, with less than 5% of patients demonstrating valvular dysplasia. Also rare, less than 5%, is association with abnormalities of pulmonary venous return or interruption of the aortic arch. Abnormalities in brain development have been reported, with increasing frequently in children with severe CHD, and may define high-risk group for operative repair. The pulmonary vascular tree also harbors abnormalities with an increase in number and muscularity of vessels. Let's read the figures 76, the anatomy and physiology of hypoplastic left heart syndrome. So, hypoplastic left-sided structures force pulmonary venous blood to flow from the left atrium through the intra-atrial communication to the right atrium. From the left atrium, uh, through the intra-atrial communication to the right atrium, downward row. Blood from the right ventricle flows both to the pulmonary circulation via the pulmonary artery, upward arrow, and the systemic circulation via the ductus arteriosus. Maintenance of ductal patency is critical for survival. The surgical principles of repair aim at maintaining this stable physiology. Okay, so there is hypoplasia of left heart, uh, left ventricle, also hypoplasia aorta, and maybe atresia of aorta and patent ductus arteriosus. So when the right ventricle is pumping, the blood goes to both of pulmonary artery and the aorta via the ductus arteriosus. Pathophysiology. A normal fetus has a parallel circulation that adequately supports single ventricle physiology before birth. Three communication: the ductus venosus, foramen oval, and ductus arteriosus. Ductus arteriosus, and foramen oval. Shunt oxygenated placental blood largely past the hepatic and pulmonary beds to supply the splenic circulation. HLHS is well supported in this situation, and as a result, it is rarely cause of fatal demise. HLS, HLHS may be secondary result of early obstructive lesion of either mitral and or aortic valvular development, and this hypothesis has been supported in animal models of mitral and aortic stenosis with resulting LV hypoplasia. However, the primary cause of the obstructive flow lesion that may secondarily lead to HLHS is unknown. Interestingly, there are no known genetic animal models that recapitulate HLHS despite the existence of the large number of mutations that affect valvular development. This argues for a complex early multifactorial event or a transient early insult. Epidemiology: HLHS, hypoplastic left heart syndrome, is a uniformly fatal disease if untreated. It represents 5% of all cases of congenital heart disease and is responsible for nearly 25% of cardiac deaths in the first week of life. Among 10,000 live births, approximately 1.8 are born with HLHS, with a slight male predominance. Of these, 25% will also have a non-cardiac anomaly and 5% chromosomal abnormality, most typically trisomy 13, 18, and 21. Syndromic lesions are rare, but among these patients, Turner syndrome, monosomy X, is the most common. The recurrence risk is 2.2% for one affected siblings and 6% for two affected siblings, suggesting a genetic predisposition but arguing against a simple effect. Clinical presentation. The presentation of infants with congenital heart disease has changed dramatically over the past 15 years. In most large centers, the majority of patients are identified through prenatal echocardiography. This early identification has not been correlated consistently with a better outcome, although some tachypnea and metastasis may be present. It is not until the ductus arteriosus begins to close that the children with HLHS manifest evidence of impaired systemic perfusion with pallor, lethargy, and diminished femoral pulses. Diminished femoral pulses. Okay. Makes sense. Cardiac examination reveals a dominant RV impulse, a single second heart sound, and often non-specific soft systolic murmur. Non-specific soft systolic murmur. Electrocardiographic examinations reveals RA enlargement and RV hypertrophy. Chest X-ray occasionally shows mild cardiomegaly and increased pulmonary vascular markings. Diagnosis: physical examination of children with HLHS is usually normal. The examination is determined by underlying anatomy as well as the chronicity of the disease, ductal closure, and PFR. Poor perfusion, weak distal pulses that may not be present because of the size of the ductus. Acidosis and sepsis-like pictures may confound the diagnosis. In the absence of risk factors or laboratory findings consistent with sepsis, one should look for left-sided obstructive lesion. There are no specific laboratory indicators of HLHS. These patients usually exhibit normal values. With ductal pressure and malperfusion, and organ compromise may be reflected by evidence of metabolic acidosis as well as altered hepatic and renal function tests. At 20 weeks of gestation, a fetal echocardiogram has a reasonable visualization of the cardiac structures. It is, however, neither feasible nor cost-effective to screen all pregnancies. Therefore, a selective approach is currently taken by which only mothers at high risk are screened. Ventricular size discrepancy and frequently the first hint of impending problems. Certainly, the presence of an intact or restrictive atrial septum should prompt high-risk delivery initiation, where an urgent post-delivery atrial septectomy or catheter-based rectostomy and atrial stenting can be rapidly performed. The use of prenatal screening improves the prenatal condition of the child, but may not translate into an improved outcomes, at least case of transposition of the great arteries. After delivery, The infant should undergo two-dimensional and Doppler echocardiography to define anatomy and to an extent sufficient for medical and surgical decision making. It is important to distinguish HLHS from other diseases that may mimic certain of its features, as their management may differ substantially. Chest radiography often demonstrates a mild cardiomegaly and excessive pulmonary blood flow. A head ultrasound should be obtained in all patients to rule out intracranial hemorrhage and minimize the risk of heparinization. Patients with medical necrotizing enterocolitis should have not course intravenous antibiotics before first stage palliation. Medical therapy. Regardless of the anatomic subtype, preoperative stabilization is critical to the ultimate outcome of patients with HLHS. Nearly all patients with suspected HLHS are transported on the prostaglandin E1 at the dose 0.01 to 0.025 microgram per kilos per minute. Two clinical dose-dependent side effects of PGA1 are hypotension and apnea. They are infrequently clinical significant. Umbilical arteries, umbilical arterial and umbilical venous lines are used for monitoring and central access the most patient. Most infants can ventilate with natural airway and indeed will often have more favorable hemodynamics while extubated. Supplemental oxygen should generally be avoided, as it will act as pulmonary vasodilator, increasing PVR and increasing Kp and Ks, and thus decreasing systemic perfusion. Nootropic support is required in patients who have had prenatal insults, but is otherwise rarely necessary. The goal of this maneuver is to get the patient to the operating room as stable as possible. Next, frugal therapy. There are two primary therapies for HLHS. One, stage reconstructive surgery leading to modified Fontan closure procedure, and two, heart transplantation. Heart transplantation is discussed in detail in chapters 89, and these chapters focus on stage reconstructive surgery. Over the past 25 years, the Norwood procedure has evolved to become the standard approach in nearly all institutions that care for neonates and infants in HLHS. There are three primary goals of first stage palliation. One, establishment of unrestricted interarterial communication to provide complete mixing and avoidance of pulmonary venous hypertension. Establish in interatrial communication to provide complete mixing and avoidance of hypertension. Second, establishment of reliable source of pulmonary blood flow, allowing for development of pulmonary vasculature and for the minimization of the volume load and the single ventricles. And the third, provision of an obstructed flow from the ventricle to the systemic circulation. Most institutions will offer cervical palliation to nearly all patients with HLHS, very low birth weight infants, and those with non-lethal genetic syndromes. Stage 1. Reconstructive procedures. Two perfusion techniques can be used for first stage palliation: deep hypothermic and circulatory arrest. DHCA, deep hypothermic circulatory arrest, DHCA, and selective antegrade continuous cerebral perfusion. Uh, Selective antegrade continuous cerebral perfusion. At the present, there is no consensus on the superiority of the one approach over the others. The child is brought to the operating room and ventilated on the room air with care taken to avoid hyperventilation. A full midline sternotomy is performed, and the thymus is removed in its entirety, with care being taken to avoid the phrenic nerves. The pericardium is open, and obligatory medicinal inspection is performed. to confirm the echocardiographic findings and in particular to identify abnormalities of the aortic arch and coronary arteries. The ascending and descending aorta, head vessels, ductus arteriosus, and pulmonary arteries are mobilized extensively with care taken to preserve integrity of the recurrent laryngeal nerve. No attempts is made to dissect systemic veins. Poor string sutures are placed in the proximal main pulmonary arteries and generously around the RA appendage, through which heparin is administered. Previously thought pulmonary hemograph hemiartery patch is trimmed and in an extended arrowhead shape and set aside. After the after the activated clotting time reach 300 300 seconds, the patient is cannulated with the arterial cannula inserted at the base of the MPA and a single venous cannula inserted in the RA. Cardiopulmonary bypass is initiated and snares are brought down around the branch PAs. The patient is cooled 18 Celsius over 15 minutes, during which time any remaining dissection is performed. A side beating clamp is placed on the innominate artery and Gore-Tex graft, usually 4.0 millimeters, patient over 3.2 kilos is anastomoses uh, in an end to a shut fashion to the artery. This can be done either while cooling before commencing cardiopulmonary bypass. The clamp is removed and flow is assessed. If blood doesn't flow easily out of the open shunt, the anastomosis should be revised. A large hemoclip is placed to temporarily occlude the shunt. An alternative success of uh, uh, an alternative source of pulmonary blood flow is a 5.0 millimeters RVVA shunt, described initially by Norwood and repopularized by Sano. Some institutions have reported that this technique provides a smoother postoperative course and it has gained wide popularity. One initiation of circulatory arrest are snares are brought down around the brachiocephalic vessels, and spoon clamp is placed on the descending aorta distal to the ductal insertion site. Cardioplegia is administered in a retrograde fashion through the side port of the arterial cannula. After the patient blood volume has been drained into the reservoir, all canals and PA snares are removed. The ductus arteriosus is ligated then on the PA side, pulmonary artery side, and divided on the aortic side. The atrial septum is excised completely, working through the atrial purse string sutures. Though it is seldom necessary, visualization can be improved through the right atriotomy. Next, the main PA is divided close to the branch PA, and the defected of in the distal main PA segmental is closed with an oval homograph patch or primarily in vertical flexions. At the point of at the point beginning immediately adjacent to the divided MPA, the diminutive aorta is incised medially and the aortotomy is carried superiorly along the underside of the transfer arch through the ductal insertion site to a point approximately 1 centimeter distal. Importantly, uh, all redundant ductal tissues is excised, and the coarctation shelf is sometimes debrided. Alternatively, the segment is excised and the isthmus and the dorsal portion of the proximal descending aorta are re-anastomosis. The proximal aortic to the proximal PA connection is performed using interrupted fine propylene sutures to connect the root of the blood vessels. Next, the arch is reconstructed using the homograph patch, cutting the sutures line down to complete the Damus Kaye Stansel, DKS, anastomosis proximally. Let's see figures 76.2. Incision of hypoplastic left heart syndrome, first stage palliation. Cannulation is performed with an arterial cannula in the base of main pulmonary artery and a single venous cannula through the generous purse string around the right atrial appendage. Subsequent incisions, as described in the text, are indicated by dotted lines. This is by the page for aortic augmentation and completely of the arteriopulmonary anastomosis is fashioned from pulmonary homograph insert. The distal Blalock Taussig shunt anastomosis is performed to the origin of the right PA pulmonary artery. Although one can also do this during rewarming after removal of the aortic cross clamp, the arch is infused with cold saline to assess the geometry and rule out kinking or residual obstruction. The atrium is infused with cold saline to the air, and the canal are repositioned. CPB uh, is begun. Cardiopulmonary bypass is begun, and the patient warm to 37 Celsius over 20 minutes. At this point, it is important to assess prompt and equivalent filling of coronary distribution, and any perfusion defect should be addressed immediately with diffusion of the orthopulmonary anastomosis. During warming, obvious bleeding should be controlled. Figure 76.3. Damus Kaye Stansel anastomosis. DKS. Okay. Damus Kaye Stansel. Oh, so the dacron is connected to the right ventricle to the main pulmonary arteries. Okay. After complete excision of the ductal tissues and the interrupted anastomosis of the medial aspect of the aorta and the main pulmonary artery, the homograph patch is used to augment the hypoplastic aortic arch and complete the DKS. The modified right Blalock Taussig shunt. Modified right Blalock Taussig shunt is complete from the innominate artery to the right pulmonary artery. Innominate artery to the right pulmonary artery. An alternative approach, Sano modification, and B substitutes a right ventricle pulmonary artery Gore-Tex conduit for Blalock Taussig shunt. As a note above, it is in an increasing number of institutions, the RVPA shunt Sano modification is used as a source of pulmonary blood flow. Numerous modifications have been employed, although the learning curve is not as steep as with the classic Norwood procedures, using the right modified MBT shunt. These refinements include shunt size and structures, rigid versus non-rigid. PA and ventricular shunt anastomotic techniques, patch augmentation, bevel size and sutures technique, and shunt location, route to the right or left side of the aorta. Operatively, the other two principal components, arterial septectomy and arch reconstruction, of stage 1 operation are identical. The LVPA, ventricle and pulmonary artery conduit, is constructed from a 5 mm rigid Gore-Tex graft. The distal end is either sewn directly to the pulmonary artery at the distal divided insertion of the main pulmonary artery or sewn into an oval homograph patch. This patch is then used to augment the pulmonary artery. The RV is then inspected to determine the site of ventriculotomy. The proper site of is usually obvious but may entail insertion of a right angle clamp through the pulmonary valve to avoid identification. The anastomosis of the proximal end of the shunt is performed with the heart arrest. There are a variety of techniques that can be employed for the proximal anastomosis, including various bevels, patch augmentation, as well with the distal anastomosis and or insertion of the proximal end of the shunt below the epicardial surface into the ventricular cavity. In all cases, the goal is to prevent the occurrence of RVPA shunt obstruction, requiring intervention that is more common with this technique. A third stage palliative strategy gaining popularity in many centers for a variety of indication is the hybrid procedures. Here, the physiological principles are inviolate and unrestricted systemic blood flow and a reliable and measure source of pulmonary blood flow and an unrestricted interarterial communication. However, in contrast to the Norwood procedure, the hybrid technique doesn't require cardiac arrest in the neonatal period. The following strategy is utilized. First, unrestricted arterial communication is achieved by atrial septostomy, usually supported by an intra-arterial stents. Secondary, systemic flow is achieved by ductal stenting. Third, pulmonary blood flow is controlled by placement of the bilateral PA veins. There are cogent arguments for why one might want to either perform or delay the large definitive operation uh, that entails arch reconstruction. However, there are no existing data to definitely support either strategy. Regardless, the hybrid strategy with comprehensive stage 2 operation that includes TKAs and arch reconstruction along with all components of the classic stage 2 cardiopulmonary anastomosis can be performed safely and provides another alternative in cases where stage 1 might be deemed at high risk. One drawback unique to this procedure is the relatively common occurrence of reverse coarctation that occur approximately 25% of the patient. The distal end of the rectal stent can be obstruct the more proximal aorta, retrograde aortic arch obstruction, RAAO, retrograde aortic arch obstruction, potentially limiting coronary and brachiocephalic blood flow, especially in cases with of aortic atresia. A number of temporizing solutions to reverse coarctation have been advocated, including reverse stenting of the aortic isthmus, through the ductal stents, as well as reverse BT or central. Future studies will be required to delineate and customize each palliative approach to a particular patient, as it is unlikely that a single strategy will suit all. Regardless of surgical modification, the average duration of hospitalization is 7 to 21 days, with the limiting factors often being the establishment of adequate oral intake. Stage 2 procedure. Two important observations by Norwood and colleagues early in the reconstructive experience from the institution of the intermediate stage between the initial palliation and the completion of the total cardiopulmonary connection. The first observation was that there was time-related interstage mortality. The second stage of the chronic volume load of the systemic pulmonary shunt could create systolic ventricular dysfunction. Thus, an intermediate stage was initiated as either bidirectional cardiopulmonary anastomosis, Glenn shunt or Hemi-Fontan procedure, bidirectional bidirectional cardiopulmonary anastomosis sets the patient up for an extracardiac conduit, whereas Hemi-Fontan procedure sets the patient up for lateral tunnel compression Fontan and Fontan. No long-term data prove the superiority of the one approach over the other. In general, at approximately 4 to 6 months of age, stage 1 survivors are catheterized to evaluate both both pressure through the heart and the anatomy of PAs. Use of cardiopulmonary anastomosis before 3 months of age is usually associated with increased hypoxia and upper body venous congestion. The technique for bidirectional cardiopulmonary anastomosis is fairly standard. The approach is through reoperative median sternotomy, during which care is taken in regard of the dissection of the neo-aorta, which is often adherent to the left side of the sternum and somewhat fragile. The patient is cannulated in standard fashion with an arterial cannula in the neonates and in the neo-aorta, a small angle venous canal in the SVC, and a straight canal in the body of the right atrium. Although it is impossible to perform this procedure without cardiopulmonary bypass, the authors find it considerably easier to use CPB and believe that the anatomic result is improved. Extracorporeal circulation is begun, and a snare is blew down around the SVC cannula after ligation and division of the azygous vein. The previous shunt is divided and ligated near the innominate artery. A vascular clamp is placed at the SVC RA junction, and the SVC is divided with a great care is not injuring the sinus node. The atrial portion is closed in two layers with 5 monofilament sutures. The PA is opened at the superior portion and inspected carefully. If preoperative catheterization reveal a PA stenosis, this is addressed with pulmonary homograph patch augmentation. Uh, The SVC is then anastomosed the superior aspect of the right PA, pulmonary artery, as medially as possible through the left PA. The snare is removed from the SVC cannula, and the one or two RA lines are blew into the mediastinum percutaneously from the right and inserted in the body of the RA. Patient is weaned from CPB and the SVC canal is removed. Modified ultrafiltration is performed during which all sutures lines are checked for hemostasis. At the, at the completion of modified structures, or the completion of modified ultrafiltration, SVC pressure can be measured directly. In general, this patient can be extubated soon after they return to the intensive care unit. An alternative approach is the hemi-Fontan procedures. So the before is uh, bidirectional pulmonary anastomosis. Okay. The next alternative approach is hemi-Fontan procedures, which the authors perform under DHGA. The details of this procedure are summarized in Figure 76 4b. The hemi-Fontan is usually performed under DHGA using the piece of folded homograph to augment the PA and create the superiority cardiopulmonary anastomosis and the RAPA dam simultaneously. This dam subsequently will be removed for the lateral tunnel completion Fontan operation for a patient who have undergone first stage hybrid procedures. Stage 2 palliation is considerably more complex. Here, the following component must be achieved: removal of the atrial stents, the septectomy, completion of the DKS anastomosis, stents from the stent removal from the duct and aorta that must be the construct, constructed, and removal of PA bands with patch pulmonary arterioplasty if needed. Stage 3 procedure. Between age 2 and 5, usually on the basis of combination of the patient weight, growth, characteristic, and arterial saturation, the patient is re-imagined by a whole cardiograph. And occasionally, the cardiac catheterization or magnetic resonance imaging. If there are no anatomic issues to be addressed with a central based intervention, the patient is referred to Fontan completion via extracardiac or lateral tunnel fontan. The extracardiac conduit, DHCA, are or continuous mild moderate hypothermic bypass with or without aortic clamp is employed, whereas the HCA is used for the lateral tunnel. The approach is through the operative median of sternotomy. The following paragraph describes the basic steps of extracardiac fontan. The patient be carefully cannulated in a standard fashion. An arterial cannula is placed in the aortic reconstruction. The CPB is begun, and the tourniquets are applied around the caval cannula. A vascular clamp is placed at the IVC-RA junction, and then IVC is divided. The arterial portion is closed partially in two layers with fine monofilament sulfates. The conduit the conduit 18 to 22 millimeter Gore-Tex is trimmed to the appropriate length to avoid compression of the right pulmonary vein, which typically is shorter than one may be expected. And 4 millimeter fenestration is punched in the medial aspect near the IVC portion. The IVC conduit anastomosis is complete with a monofilament sutures, followed by a side-to-side anastomosis of the remaining cardiac portion of the IVC opening. With the conduit, leaving a rim of conduit around the fenestration. Next, the PAs are opened in the inferior portion and inspected directly. If preoperative studies revealed any PA stenosis and the befilled end of Gore-Tex conduit would not span the areas of stenosis, the situation is addressed with pulmonary homograph patch augmentation. The conduit is then anastomosed to the inferior aspect of the PAs, angled slightly medially toward the SVC. The angle natures of the superior portion of the conduit effectively augment the pulmonary conveyance from the right to left PA. Conduit is infused with saline to the air and the patient is weaned from CPB. The SVC canal is removed and the period of modified ultrafiltration is begun. All sutures line are checked for hemostasis. The other composition of modified ultrafiltration, the SVC pressure is measured directly with a thoracic line. An additional monitoring line is placed in the RA. All canals are removed and the protamine is administered. In general, the patient can be extubated soon after their return to the HCU. An alternative operative approach is the lateral tunnel fontan, which the authors perform under the HCA. The technique detail of this procedure are summarized in figure 76 5b. The lateral tunnel fontan is performed under the HCA using a piece of fenestrated Gore-Tex patch to baffle blood from IVC to PAs. The previously constructed PA-RA homograph dam is excised. There are no long-term data suggesting that superiority of the one technique over the extracardiac fontan. Advantage of the extracardiac fontan include the lack of arterial sutures line and the ability to perform the procedure at mild hypothermia without DHA or aortic cross-clamping. On the other hand, the lateral tunnel fontan is uh, result in a more reliable penetration, is faster and pose no risk of compression to the right superior pulmonary vein. Outcomes. Despite continued improvement in outcomes, patients with HLHS continue to present a formidable challenge. The authors group report a result of 15 years children Hospital of Philadelphia experience with 840 patients undergoing stage 1 surgery for HLHS between 1985 and 1999, and the 1, 2, 5, 10, and 15 years survival for the entire cohort were 51, 43, 40, 39, and 39%, respectively. A later era of stage 1 coagulation was associated with significantly improved survival, with a 3-year survival for patients undergoing stage 1 reconstruction from 1995 to 1998 of 66 versus 28% for those undergoing surgery between 1984 and 1988. More recent studies uh, have shown further improvement and demonstrated the variability in outcome may be influenced by anatomy. One retrospective study of risk factors for operative and 1-year mortality in 158 patients who underwent the Norwood procedure demonstrated that the diagnosis of HLHS is not a predictor of mortality. HLHS was present in 102 patients, and other forms of functional in single ventricle with systemic outflow tract, although the presence of an extracardiac anomaly. Okay. Genetic syndrome or additional cardiac defect was predictive of worse survival in the first year of life. Additional preparative or operative treatment strategies may improve morbidity and mortality case. A consecutive series of 115 patients who underwent stage operation from Milwaukee identified the risk factors for mortality and the impact of the new treatment strategy. Between 1996 and 2001, hospital survival was 93% compared with 53% for the time interval between 92 and 96. Survival to stage 1 and stage 2 population was also significantly improved, increasing from 44 to 81%. Anti-inflammatory treatment strategies continuous saturated venous oxygen monitoring and the use of phenosibenzamin were factors favoring survival to stage 2. Another approach has been development of the home surveillance programs. One study compared patient discharged before the initiation of the home surveillance to those discharged with infant scales and a pulse oximeter. The parents maintained daily log of weight and arterial oxygen saturation and were instructed to contact their physician in case arterial oxygen saturation less than 70% and acute weight loss more than 30 grams per days or failure to gain at least 20 grams during 3-day period. Interstage mortality was 15.8% in the historic group and zero in the monitor group, suggesting that monitoring programs may provide significant benefit in reducing interstage attrition. As briefly mentioned above, recent reports advocate that an RVPA conduit rather than MBT shunt may improve the outcome after stage 1 reconstruction. However, further studies have indicated the need for caution before the broad adoption of the RVPA conduit. The CHOP group compared the outcome of all neonates who underwent stage 1 reconstruction between 2002 and 2004 with the use of the RVPA shunt and MBT shunt. In all, 149 infants underwent a stage 1 reconstruction for HLHS or its variants. There was no difference on cervical mortality, time to extubation, or length of hospital stay between the two techniques. Although there were no difference in overall mortality, patients with an RVPA conduit require more conduit-related intervention and return earlier in for stage 2 reconstruction. The most important individual study to address the value of shunt types is the single ventricle reconstruction (SVR) study. The prospective randomized multi-institutional NIH trial that has comprehensively compared the MBT shunt to the RVPA conduit as source of the pulmonary blood flow in stage population for HLHS. The initial, the initial reports demonstrated that that transplantation-free survival at the 12 months was higher with the VPA conduit than with the MBT shunt group. MBT shunt. However, the RVPA shunt group had more unintended intervention and complication. After 12 months, available data showed nevertheless no significant difference in transplantation-free survival between two groups. Ongoing analysis will determine if the early survival benefit of the RVPA conduit approach will translate into a long-term survival advantage. For now, the authors feel this should be considered as important experiment in progress. In addition, there may be institution-specific factors for which these multi-institutional studies may not be able to answer. Patients who have complete stage progression for HLHS will frequently require reintervention. A study examining the reintervention during 6-year period between 95 and 2001 found that 120 and 23 procedures were performed in 71 patients. The median time from Fontan completion to reoperation was 3.6 years, with indication for intervention including arrhythmia, cyanosis, exercise intolerance, protein losing enteropathy, atrioventricular valve regurgitation, and other indications. The procedures include pacemaker incision or revision 48%, including previously include hepatic veins, revision to lateral tunnel or extracardiac conduit pathway, cardiac transplantation, enlargement of creation of bevel fenestration, and isolated AVV repair or replacement, and other procedures. There were 5 early and 5 late deaths. Hospital mortality was great among patients undergoing cardiac transplant, 44%, who accounted for 80% of the early deaths. Most reintervention can be performed with minimal morbidity and mortality. However, patients who require cardiac transplantation after Fontan procedure fare poorly. For high-risk infant, some have advocated catheter-based hybrid approach. Stage 1, rectal stenting and PA bending. Stage 2, septectomy and arch augmentation and pulmonary arteries anastomosis with or without pulmonary debending on arterioplasty. And stage 3, catheter-based Fontan completion. One report of the hybrid stage 1 procedure in 14 high-risk units between 2003 and 2005 demonstrated promising result with a 78.5% hospital survival rate. 8 patients underwent stage 2 procedure with 2 operative dates. This technique may be limited to in certain anatomic subsets, such as a patient with aortic atresia in which Reductal retrograde coarctation is significant problems. The result from stage 3 patients with Fontan circulation also continue to improve. The authors group reviewed the outcomes of 332 patients, 281 with lateral tunnel and uh, 51 with extracardiac Fontan procedure. There was a 93.4% hospital survival rate, and by questionnaire, 94.6% of guardians describe their children overall health as excellent or good, and 5.4% reported it as fair or poor. School performance were described as above average, 30.2%, average in in 39.9%, and below average in 29.8%. With regard to cardiac functional status, 34.2% responded that their children had no limitation to physical activity. 42.5% report a slightly limitation, 12.1% report a significant limitation, and 1.2% report a severe limitation. Although this data suggested acceptable follow-up of the Fontan version and shed positive light on the quality of life of this patient population. In comparing outcomes of extracardiac conduit and lateral tunnel Fontan connection, results have been conflicting. The Toronto group reported a result of 60 extracardiac conduit and 47 lateral tunnel total pulmonary connection performed between 1994 and 98. Overall operative mortality was 5.6% and didn't differ between groups. The lateral tunnel group had significantly higher incidence of postoperative sinoatrial node dysfunction, supraventricular tachycardia, and need for temporary postoperative pacing. The median duration of ICU stay and need for ventilatory support were longer in the lateral tunnel group. Holter analysis showed that higher incidence of atrial arrhythmias in the lateral tunnel group. However, other authors have not found support for one technique over the others. For example, the Carleston group found an incidence of sinus node dysfunction of 21% in the lateral tunnel group and 99, 59% in the extracardiac group. No permanent pacemaker were placed in the lateral tunnel group, whereas three were placed in the extracardiac group. Another report from the same unit demonstrated identical operative mortality and similar mean Fontan procedures, pulmonary gradient, and common arterial pressure in the first 24 hours after completion of the cardiopulmonary connection. Duration of mechanical ventilation, ICU stays, chest tube drainage, hospital stays didn't differ. Again, extracardiac conduit patient had a higher incidence of sinus node dysfunction, both both in the postoperative period and at hospital discharge. This technique also appear equivalent in the situation of failing Fontan, with no hospital days, no arrhythmia at the hospital discharge, no difference in mean duration of intubation and inotropic supports, ICU stays, hospital stays, or episode of acute postoperative arrhythmia.